We are ready. Okay, welcome to the April 18th meeting of the Salina Board of Zoning Appeals. I guess I'm hereby calling the meeting to order. It looks as though we have a quorum, and we're ready to jump right in on the approval of the last meeting's minutes, which was January 17th. Has everybody read them, and do we have comments or a motion or both?
I move to approve the minutes as read.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have the motion to accept them as published and read. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
There are no opposed. We can move on to today's new business. First piece of business, item 3.1, application number V19-1, filed by Mike, I should have learned how to pronounce this in advance, Schmatterer, on behalf of Mid-States Energy Works, Inc., requesting a maximum lot coverage variance of 35% from 50%, which is the maximum lot coverage allowed in an I-2 light industrial zoning district, to 85% to allow construction of an addition to an existing building. Subject property is legally described as lots 1 to 3, block 11, plus 5 feet of the adjacent vacated alley in the Calkins addition to the city of Salina, Saline County, Kansas, and addressed as 618 North Santa Fe Avenue. And we're ready for the staff report and the pictures on the wall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The aerial photo is where we'll start with the story of this application. The property is located in the Calkins addition, which was platted in 1867, and the existing building that is there today was constructed in 1957. And it was constructed for Mid-State Armature Works, which is now Mid-State Energy Works, the applicant. So the applicant has been in this building since 1957 when it was constructed. They're the original owners of the building and have been there ever since. When the property was constructed in 1957, the zoning for that property was Zone F, which at the time was light industrial. The light industrial district prior to the current one we have, when it was F in 1957, did not limit a individual as to setback and did not limit them as to lot coverage. So what that means is the building that was constructed with a 0 lot line along both Decatur and Santa Fe. So if you drive by it today, you'll see that the property sits on the property line on both its north side and on its west side. And that F zoning district also did not limit the lot coverage. So currently, the property already exceeds the 50% maximum by having a 63% lot coverage. And what the owner and applicant is proposing to do, and it's in the black here, if you can see it, is propose in addition to the south where they have green space to have a new addition. That addition is 22 feet by 84 feet and would increase the lot coverage from the current 63% to 85%. So that's going to be the request that we are going to be dealing with today, is the lot coverage going from 63% to 85%. The bulk regulations of the current zoning district, which is I-2 but still light industrial, was adopted in 1977, and it does have both front yard setback requirements and lot coverage maximums. Now, because the previous light industrial district did not have setback requirements, there is a provision in the bulk regulations that you are allowed to match the front yard setback as long as you as long as you meet the other bulk requirements, which we will not be meeting the requirements of the lot coverage, but the variance is intended to address that. So when we look at the surrounding zoning, if we go back to the aerial photo, John, I'll just kind of walk you through it. So to the north, we do have C5 property, and this is a auto dealership, Mike Sell Motors, and well, that helps. Thank you, John. So to the north is the C5, it's the Mike Sell Motors. There's a non-climatized storage building, so basically just an open warehousing building that doesn't have any occupancy to it. And then to the south, we have Chuck's Bar, which is the restaurant along Santa Fe. And then to the west, we have a trucking company, Beaver Express Trucking. So that's the surrounding area, which is primarily already I-2 with a little bit of commercial, as you can see to the north where we have the red C5 district. When we look at the uniqueness to the property and how it is unique and should be considered for a variance, the applicant states that they would like to add offices to expand their capabilities as a business, and without the variance, they would not be able to, and that the property currently is surrounded by right-of-way. And staff would agree that if you look to the west, we have Santa Fe. If you look to the north, we have Decatur. Even on the east side, you have a public alley where you can't expand, which really only leaves you to the south. And to the south, what we have is an existing parking lot for the Chuck's Bar and 25 feet of green space between the building and the property line, which the applicant is intending to use. And staff believes that the combination of the landlocked nature of the site along with the development pattern, which has 0 setbacks, which you see primarily in the C4 district further south on Santa Fe, but you also see it in a pre-existing non-conforming fashion along Santa Fe, is atypical and unique to the site and could justify allowing the variances requested. Looking at the effects on the neighbors, the applicant states that granting the variance will not adversely affect the adjacent property owners. The most direct adjacent property owner would be the one to the south, as we have right-of-ways separating the properties to both the west. Aerial photo work, John, if that helps. We have the adjacent property owners are across the street to the west, across the street to the north, and across the alley to the east. So the only one that's actually abutting is to the south, and there we have a parking lot. In addition, the addition will match the existing setback, and so it shouldn't have any major impacts, and the impacts that would be affecting the neighbors would be to the property to the south and should be fairly minimal. In looking at unnecessary hardship, the applicant states that strict application of the lot coverage provisions would make it impossible to add or do any expansions to his current business because he already exceeds the 50% maximum because it's a pre-existing non-conforming structure. And that is true. Currently we are at 63%, which means that no additions could take place. And so the only way to do an addition or expansion is to the south, because we are on the lot lines on the west, north, and we only have 5 feet to the east, which really leaves this opening to the south as the only possible option for a physical expansion. In looking at the effect of the public health, safety, and welfare, the applicant states that the addition will not adversely affect the public and would improve the area's appearance. The addition also would not impede any emergency access or egress to the surrounding facilities. And staff would believes that the proposed building addition would have little impact on the health, safety, and welfare of the public. The biggest impact would probably be a slight increase in stormwater runoff because we are increasing the impervious surface area of the lot. And one of the things that we would recommend, and we'll get to a little bit later in the staff report, is that if you do decide to approve the addition, that you make it contingent on a guttering system, as we are getting really close to the neighboring property, and we want to make sure that any water runoff is directed to Santa Fe through a guttering system. Another implication is we do have over 90 feet from the adjacent property owner to the south, who is mostly affected by this. So it should have minimal impacts on the health, safety, and welfare of the public. Parking is always a concern when we are doing an addition, because when we add physical space to a structure, we also potentially add an increase in occupancy to the building, which would require an increase in parking. In this instance, with the new addition, in addition to the existing conditions, the property would be required to have 7 off-street parking spaces. The proposed plan has 2 off-street parking spaces that are going to be coming off the alley, and then the property also owns a satellite lot just to the northeast of here that will be able to supply at least 5, actually more than 5, but the other 5 that would be required, that parking lot would be able to absorb. And so that would be another condition that we would look at if you would wish to approve this application, is that the property owner and applicant always maintain at least 7 off-street parking spaces, 2 on-site and at least 5 off-site to meet the needs of the off-street parking requirements. Looking at the conformity and general spirit and intent of the ordinance, the applicant states that granting the variance would not only allow the business to expand, but would improve the general neighborhood and would not have any impact on the closest or most abutting property, which is to the south, Chuck's Bar. Staff would note that the intent of lot coverage requirements is to preserve the open space for air, water, and light movement, as well as setting aside sufficient area for off-street parking. Open space also limits the fire risk and the risk of fire spread that you might have if a neighboring property were to have a fire issue. However, there are several examples, and you can just see from the aerial photo, of properties that have 0 lot line setbacks. You can see them to the north, you can see them to the south, and some that have lot coverage that exceed 50% and some that are almost 100%. So you can see just from the aerial photo that there are several examples along the Santa Fe corridor that have a traditional development pattern that we see in the older parts of town, where we have 0 lot lines and lot coverages that exceed the current maximum of 50%. So given the historical development pattern and the similarities the property has to other properties in this corridor, we believe that the approving the variance would still be in the general spirit and intent. The lot coverage limitation is primarily designed and intended for more suburban development, and even though we aren't in the C4 downtown business district, we are on the Santa Fe corridor, which has a similar pattern. So we do have a number of alternatives that we've listed for you. And number 1 is you could approve the maximum lot coverage variance with or without any conditions if you find the findings of fact can be made. You could postpone action of the application if you feel additional information is needed. You could deny the application if you feel like the proper findings cannot be made for the applicant's request. Based on the historical development pattern along Santa Fe and the fact that there is a hardship, that the only way to expand the property is to continue to exceed the 50% maximum, staff feels that the variance request could be approved with a number of conditions. And I have both of those listed on page 7. The first being that a downspout system be constructed with the addition to make sure that water is directed to Santa Fe where it can properly drain. And the second is that the proper amount of off-street parking spaces, primarily being 2 on-site off-street parking spaces and at least another 5 off-street parking spaces in the satellite lot, be retained by the property owner at all times. And with that, we will take any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? All right, next phase of the agenda in this hearing would be for comments by the applicant. And I assume that we have a couple of people here. Please identify yourself and add anything you wish to add. And
Well,
then
my name is Mike Schmatter. You got it really close.
Okay.
I am the owner and president, or majority owner. I've been the owner since year 2000. That's the last 19 years. Basically, where we came up with this is we have some offices, makeshift offices or above storage area on that west side of the building. And they were thrown together, I'm sure, by employees when they had time back in the 50s and 60s. And they're dingy, they're dirty, they don't keep the noise out, they don't keep the dust out. I really want a conference room. We're getting more and more customers coming to see us. And I've worked with John, worked with Doug Stevenson and Jim Manley, all three of them. And they finally told me I was crazy trying to remodel inside. There's too much stuff to move. We can't keep the business going doing that. And really the best way to do it is just to expand to the south. So
Okay. Any
I guess we have
questions?
to have a variance in order to move forward, so
Right.
any questions you have? As far as the off-street parking, I don't know if you want to flip back to the overhead picture, but
It's just,
we currently have 8 employees. 4 of them work on the road almost full-time, and they already park in that satellite lot. In fact, you can see the vehicles in there if you look at that aerial photo. Well, I guess there's only 2 parked in there at a time, but
it's up there where it says request area only, yeah.
we don't have a marked-out parking area there, but we do have, that's where they park. When they're on the road, they want to be parked in that lot because we can lock it up.
Okay. Do we have any questions from the board here?
No.
Is there any possible way that you could zoom in on that image?
Where-
Do people park off the north side of the building on Decatur Street?
Decatur.
Decatur Street?
Actually, we probably don't have one vehicle on the street for more than 3 or 4 hours a week.
Okay, I just asked because in one of the photos, it looked like there was a vehicle parked off the north side of the building.
There is, but it's not on the street. On the north side of the building, there's a concrete apron there between the 2 drives, and my wife and I both park on that.
Okay.
So with 2 vehicles, we park. And in one of the pictures, you can see my truck parked there.
But it's not recognized as an official parking stall,
See
correct?
it? Yeah, and it's not on the street, but it's not marked as parking, and I don't know if you could mark that as parking.
Okay,
But we can squeeze 2 vehicles in there pretty easily.
sounds good.
Okay. Are there any other citizens from the general area or this community who want to speak to this matter? There being none, then thank you for your time, and I guess we're back to the board for a motion.
And I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
I have a question for staff.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is an issue of density and really what we're talking about. I have no problem with this, but my question would be, if this building was demolished or a building similar to this, what is the density requirement when it's replaced? And if so, are there green space requirements and landscaping requirements, or are there none in this area or in that zoning classification?
The I-2 district does not have landscaping requirements, nor does it have paved parking requirements. It does have parking requirements, but those requirements require that the surface be an all-weather surface, meaning that the surface performs in rain, snow, and doesn't pothole out, doesn't rut out, that kind of thing, which you can accomplish through millings or gravel or rock like that. Landscaping is voluntary, and they do have some voluntary landscaping, as you see in the pictures. It's primarily in the public right-of-way out front. Oh, yeah, John's got some pictures here. You can see there's some low-growing junipers, shrubs, and then some ornamental trees, things like that. The question as to what would happen if a tornado or some other devastating event were to take place on site and the property is damaged to the point where it needs to be removed, it would have to be built back to conform to the I-2 standards. That's it. That's today. Now, if you were to approve the variance, it would allow them to build a structure back that has up to 85% log coverage. Now, the variance that we're requesting does not cover front yard setbacks at the moment, and so it would have to come back in a different form where it would have to meet the front yard setbacks or come back to this board.
Because the front yard setback would exist. We're not at zero clearance on these lots, right?
Zero clearance meaning zero front yard setbacks?
Zero frontage, yeah.
Yeah, this has zero frontage today. It goes to the property line along Decatur and along Santa Fe
Right,
today.
but what I'm saying is if it was rebuilt on this lot, could it have zero frontage then?
No, not if it
Okay.
was a
That's
new
what I was wondering.
development.
Yeah, yeah.
What is the front yard setback on a new one?
It's going to be 25 feet, which would greatly
That would be
impact
on both
the...
streets because they're both
Yep.
front yards.
Right,
Okay.
which would greatly impact a site like this, being it's a corner lot, and it's not overly big.
And there are great benefits to zero. I'm not arguing that point, but as a planner, and on the planning level, this is something we discuss a lot. So in these areas, as they continue to get closer to downtown development and we see it spread out, it's important that we look forward and towards where it may be in the future. There's a restaurant right next door, for example.
This is an area, as is the area on East Iron, that's east of the river going towards Front Street, where you have a historical development pattern with some zero setback buildings. And that is kind of a future discussion item for Planning Commission and City Commission. There has been some discussion about creating an overlay, or we'll call it a semi-extension of the Central Business District, where you establish an area outside the downtown where you could have a zero setback. I would note to the board that the Planning Commission did give this project and the Chuck's Bar project a landscape award for that work that was done in the right-of-way out there. And of course, that is one alternative. When you have a zero setback, you can still, and you have
You can still enhance
adequate,
it.
you can still
Yes.
landscape in the right-of-way,
Yes.
so.
And gentlemen, I am here as liaison for the Planning Commission, which is why these questions. I have no problem with this project.
Any other comments or a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion that with regards to application V19-1, the board approve the maximum lot coverage variance as requested with the two staff recommendation conditions, that the addition is constructed with a guttering downspout system that directs water to Santa Fe Avenue, and that the applicant shall maintain 2 off-street parking stalls and at least 5 other satellite parking lot spaces addressed at 631 North Fifth Street.
I'll second that.
And we have a motion and a second. Any last-minute comments, discussion? There being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? There being none, we thank you for your efforts and best wishes for continuing business in North Salina.
So that would allow us to issue a permit based on those plans. So if you want to move forward with that.
Okay, next item on the agenda is, turn to the correct page here, application V19-2, filed by Ralph and Virginia Windholz, requesting the following variances on a property address is 319 South College Avenue, a minimum lot width variance of 10 feet from the 50-foot width to 40 feet, a lot depth variance of 5 feet from 100 feet to 95 feet, a minimum lot size variance of 2,200 square feet from 6,000 square feet to a total of 3,800 square feet, and on property addresses 321 South College, a variance to sections 42-58(1)B to allow a second detached garage on a residential lot. And and this is all done to allow the lots to be split with a portion added to the lot of 321 South College Avenue. And the 319 would be a reduced lot and an existing house. The subject property legally described as the north 50 feet of lots 19, 21, and 23 on South Street in Phillips 4th Edition, and the south 50 feet of the north 100 feet of lots 19, 21, and 23 on South Street in Phillips 4th Edition to the City of Salina, Saline County, Kansas, addressed as 319 and 321 South College Avenue. Staff report, please.
Allow the chair to catch his breath, and we'll proceed with our report. So, one thing we did here, this is, it's fairly complex. It's not, the concept is not complex, but looking at all the different angles and conformance issues that it creates, we created some exhibits for the commission that or board that we attached to the report. But the gist of this is that the applicants own two 50-foot by 150-foot zoning lots that are side by side. They are identical. They wish to create two separate lots, one containing only 3,800 square feet and the other one containing 10,250 square feet. So in other words, they wish to borrow from one and add to the other. And so we looked at this proposed lot split and we identified all the variances that would be necessary to allow that to take place and put those into this application. But the north lot, the lot next to the alley, it's 50 by 150. It has a house on it that was built in 1910 and a garage that was built in 1952. The south lot, which is 321, has a house that our records show was built in 1951, and then a garage that's 720 square feet was built in 1992. So the improvements on the south lot are a little bit newer than the north lot. This aerial photo, we do not have a survey per se, but this aerial photo depicts what the proposed plan is, and the plan would be to take what is today under a single ownership and to for the owners of 321 to retain this area here, including this garage, and to separate this off and make it available either for purchase or for rent without a garage. And so again, if you look at the original plat for this area, in the legal description, these are lots on South Street, and all the lots were platted north to south, but both of these lots run east-west instead of north-south, and they face College Avenue, not South Street. So the owners are the occupants of 321 South College. They recently purchased 319 South College. They'd like to split off the portions of 319 and add it to their property next door to the south. So specifically, they would like to take 10 feet from the side yard, south side yard of 319 South College and add it to their lot to allow them to widen their existing driveway. They would like to take the rear 55 feet of that lot and retain it so they could both keep and access that garage, which is accessed from the west, although it is accessed from the alley. The doors face to the west. So if this plan is approved, the north lot would have a lot width of 40 feet, not 50 feet, and it would be less deep than is what is required, and it would have less lot area or lot size than is the minimum for this district in this area. And so the result is that 321 South College would end up having two detached garages, and the ordinance limits all residential properties to a single garage. And so there's a request for that, and also a request, there's a letter attached that explains the need for the additional driveway. The minimum lot size in this zoning district is 6,000 square feet. The minimum lot width is 50 feet. The minimum lot depth is 100 feet. And so these lots, as they stand today, conform with all the R2 district requirements. It is the desire to split the lot at 319 that creates the need for these multiple variances. And so we've outlined for you that the accessory use or accessory structure ordinance allows a property to have a storage building and a detached garage or carport. And then we have just provided those definitions to you, that the primary distinction between a storage building and a garage is that garages have overhead doors to allow vehicles to enter and park. And so the uniqueness in this case is supposed to relate to something unique to the property. The applicants point to the narrow area on the north side of their residence, which only allows them to have an 8-foot driveway. They believe that adding 10 feet to the width of the lot will allow for improved access to the rear of their property, and that reducing the depth of the lot here would allow them to have room here to access this garage. So we would note that just having a large lot or oversized lot isn't in and of itself a justification for a larger garage or a second garage. As far as adverse effect on neighbors, the applicants state that no physical changes to the building are being proposed, only changes to the property lines. So we would agree with that perhaps the average passerby in the street would not notice any physical changes to the property. But we are concerned about the loss of covered parking and storage for 319. With the loss of this garage area here and the loss of that parking and covered storage, it might make that a less desirable home either to purchase or live in. And so we would like the applicant to further explain their plans for making sure that residents of this dwelling have a place to park. As to hardship, if the variances are not approved, the owners would be forced to maintain both parcels and both homes at 319 and 321. And so they would have to retain ownership without the variances, and they'd have to own and occupy 2 lots in order to make use of that garage. So they believe that strict application of the limit on the number of garages would be an unnecessary hardship. Our view of this, it is really more about personal convenience than hardship. We would like the applicants to provide additional information about the hardship that would result if they were limited to their existing driveway and constructed a storage building instead of acquiring the garage to the north. Again, we would request the applicant provide additional information about their plans for marketing the 319 property if these variances are approved. We don't see any real public impact here. Any impact would be localized. And so one factor to consider is whether this lot size reduction fits in with the development pattern in the surrounding neighborhood. And if the use of the property is limited to single family only, I don't think this is going to result in any overcrowding, even with a smaller lot, as long as these are maintained as single family homes. And so what we have noted is that there are reasons why we limit properties that are residential to a single garage. We've seen a tendency that if you have oversized garage or storage buildings, that could increase the likelihood of a future owner using that building for on-site business-related purpose. There is even one on this block that was Hume's Sales and Service, that was a vacuum cleaner repair that was located on this same block in a detached garage. So we believe that requests for a variance to allow a second detached garage should be looked at very carefully, that you should identify in your own minds what you find as unique circumstances or hardship, and make note of those so that this doesn't set an unfavorable precedent for future cases where somebody has a desire to have 2 garages on their lot. We would just point out that it would be possible to build a storage building back here up to 360 square feet. And that, while that would not be a garage, it would provide an opportunity for additional storage. So the options that we've identified for you this afternoon are to approve the variance application as submitted. That would include a variance to allow a second detached garage on the expanded lot. And that could be done if the required findings in support of the variances can all be made. You could approve a lot width variance only to allow the south 10 feet of this lot to be shifted here, which would allow a driveway to be widened, but deny the other variances associated with transferring the rear garage to the ownership of 321. You could postpone action on this application if you think additional information is needed from staff or the applicant, or you could deny the applicant's variance application altogether if you don't think findings in support of the variances can be made. We are supportive of staff of the lot width variance to allow the 10 feet to be added to the north side, but we would ask the applicants to provide you with additional information about what the need is for having a second detached garage and the hardship that would result if the rear 55 feet of 319, in other words, this area here, what would the hardship be to this lot if that could not be transferred to the lot? We'd also like the applicant to clarify what their future plans are for 319. If that information is provided to your satisfaction and you wish to approve this application in its entirety, then we have identified some possible conditions of approval. One is that we would point out that this neighborhood is zoned R2, but we think use of the lot should be limited to single-family dwellings. Two, if you approve this lot split, we think that a driveway should be constructed off the alley to provide parking spaces for the residents of 319, the north lot. We would want to make sure that the garage at the rear is only used for personal storage and use and not for any business purpose. And in approving this, you would essentially be saying that no more accessory storage buildings can be built at 321. And then our fifth requirement would be, if this is approved, that before the actual split takes place, there would need to be a survey of the property so that the split could be properly described and identified in the field. So we've provided some exhibits and a number of attachments that summarize the rules for the R2 district and accessory buildings. I think this is the best drawing that we have to illustrate what the concept is. And with that, staff would be open to any questions that board members might have. And I know the applicant's here and has some additional information they'd like to share with the board.
I have a quick question. Just north of that lot, it's in that overhead picture is labeled as 3. It's like north of 317. It looks like the lot is shaped the same way that they're proposing. Do we have any history on how that lot kind of became to be that shape? If there was a variance, it was approved for that?
I'd have to, the lines are very faint, so the lines show up on that other aerial photo, John? You're referring to this lot here north of the alley?
It's just north of 317, yeah. It looks like it's shaped the same way, and I was just wondering if there was a variance that was approved for that lot as
there
well.
Isn't that where there was once a commercial
That
building?
is where,
Is it the vacuum?
it's a very interesting property. That's where Harley Humes had his Humes sale and service, and he lived in the front, and he had a building in back that he did his vacuum cleaner repair. And then the property sold, and somebody was using the vacuum repair shop as a dwelling. And so the planning commission looked at creating a planned development district for that. But the history on this was that it was a semi-commercial property where the Mr. Humes lived on the property and had a vacuum cleaner repair business on the site at 317 South College.
Has there been any feedback from any of the neighboring residents?
Not that we are aware of or that we could report to you. We did send letters out to all these neighbors on all sides, but we have not received any written correspondence. I mean, the notice went out some time ago. Mr. Hers and I have been out of the office on Friday, Monday, and Tuesday, but we've been here all the other days, and no one has attempted to contact us about their thoughts on this application.
Any other questions? I have one clarification on your number 3 recommendation. It's where we're, no business purposes would be allowed if this were approved. Are there what businesses are allowed in an R2 zone? Not very many, are there?
No, but we just put that on there as a reinforcement and reminder. We actually have had previous cases where we had some board members that asked staff to work with the applicant that recorded a covenant that restricted that, but as someone who has had experience, I've had 2 cases where what I would term oversized garages were used for applying plastic liners to pick up beds as a business conducted in a garage. And so that would be example that there is no, you can't apply for a home occupation that would allow your garage to be used for some purpose. We've had a case where someone took their garage and they divided their garage in half and they put a beauty salon in one half and a garage in the other, and that was approved by this board, but it would have to be required to be approved by this board, not something they could do automatically. So number 3 is just a recommendation to kind of reinforce the fact that if you have 2 garages, that doesn't mean you can use one of them for a business.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification. Any other questions? Okay, would the applicant like to step forward and make any comments to the comments that have already been made and then stand for questions, please?
Yeah, I have some pictures of the inside.
Please use the podium first, and identify yourself, and then we'll accept your presentations.
Okay, my name is Jenny Windhals, and I live at 321 South College in Salina.
Okay.
And I did bring some pictures of the inside of the house at 319, if you'd like to look at them.
I guess we'd be glad to do that. Not that it's particularly, I don't know if the interior of the house is relevant or not at this point, but.
I've been inside.
I haven't.
You've been everywhere. On Facebook.
Yeah.
He wanders around more than I do. Okay. So,
And there is a house right across from 319 that the frontage is 40 foot. And then it's the corner of College and Spruce, I think, is the shape of the lot that we're trying to create as well. And since we're unable to do the work ourselves to make the necessary repairs and improvements to the house, our intentions for the property at 319 are to sell the home to someone with the ability to make the improvements and for us to add the south 10 feet of the lot to our property. This would allow us to widen our driveway and maintain the driveway. The utilities and gas meter, radon mitigation system, and the furnace all vent on that side of the house, making for a narrow drive. And we would also like to add the rear 55 feet of the lot at 319 for us to retain ownership and use the existing garage. We do have a 3-car family, and we only have a 2-car garage. And the extra parking would be an asset to our family, and the rest of the structure would be used for personal storage. If the commission is not able to approve the structure as a garage, then we would ask for approval of the variance for the structure to be used for personal storage. And we've talked to several people about purchasing the property, and neither have voiced any concerns about us keeping the 10 feet on the side of the house. Both parties were interested in the garage, and we're not opposed to selling the garage with the house, but we'd like to have approval from the board if the option, to have the option, if the opportunity arises to sell the house with the garage. And it was stated in the staff report that the loss of the garage and storage could limit the marketability and depress the value of the home. And we don't feel this variance would make the home at 319 less desirable or result in the loss of a dwelling from the city's housing stocks. It's my opinion that the house has obvious issues that affect the marketability greater than the loss of the 55 feet and the structure located at the rear. And I took the picture so you could see that. And we would ask the commission to approve the variance in its entirety. And if it can't be approved in its entirety, we would ask the variance be approved to allow us to add the south 10 feet of the lot to our lot. And in closing, I would like to ask for your approval and to thank you for your time and consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Any
Questions?
Yes. Do you currently park your vehicles in the detached garage at 321 South College?
We do, and our daughter uses the other one.
Okay. So in reference to hardship, could you provide further details or explain what would arise if the variance isn't granted?
Well, that's wide up there, but where we come in, I think that our, we'll have to have a survey, but it's narrower from the street until you get back to the opening there. And it is pretty hard to get in and out sometimes with, staying away from the house. And we don't have anywhere to put our snow, that kind of thing, just to maintain the drive.
Okay. Any other questions or comments at this point from the board?
Yes. Could you provide your reasoning for a second detached garage?
Well, it's there and we own it and we could use it for at least one parking space. And if that's not allowed, then we would just use it for storage.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else have a comment or question? I have comments, but I'm trying to wait. I have no problem with the 10-foot transfer from the 319 lot to the 321 lot and leaving a 40 by 150-foot lot, which does meet the zoning standards. I have a lot of trouble with the idea of putting that garage with the 321 house just for the long-term viability of the property in the big picture. The area is zoned R2. Conceivably, if the lots were just split lengthwise, at some point, the 319 house could have a second unit added to it, and they'd have garages and parking off-street for the use of a duplex and 2 dwelling units in an area that has seen some redevelopment and looks to me to have a lot of potential for redevelopment, and there's a lot of pressure, allegedly, in our community to get more modest price rental dwelling spaces. So I hate to see anything in an R2 group that makes a lot substandard where you can't add a second unit to it and where you have no parking. So I think in the long run, that doesn't make any sense at all. In the short run, if you could possibly retain ownership of the whole parcel, you could rent the house without renting all the garage. So you could keep the garage for your own use, or maybe have one unit rented with the house and still leave the property intact for future redevelopment.
But your plan is to sell 319, not to rent
Yeah, I
it.
would think 319 would be greatly diminished in value with no parking in a substandard lot.
So if
But, yes, sir.
this were split were approved, where would the residents of 319 park?
Yeah, if 319 were completely freestanding property as you propose, where would the parking for 319
There
be?
is room back there for 2 spots.
But then there'd be no backyard for
Yeah, very
gardening
little.
or picnic table or anything like that. And the most convenient parking would probably end up being on street, since the alley's only 10 feet wide.
We have these properties in Salina, obviously, and we sell these properties in Salina, and they're typically around Oakdale, or around whatever, Cottonwood, and in that area, and then around my area in Highland and off of the railroad tracks there. But it is not a desirable situation to have a lot that doesn't run a full length, and that there's some other property behind it.
Mr. Winholz wanted to say something to that?
Yeah, Ralph Windholz, 321 South College. You were mentioning about how it would be desirable to rent. We did take a lot of estimates, and it's not in a condition to rent right now. There's nobody here, I think, that would want to live in the house in the condition it is now. It's going to be quite expensive for us to maintain the 2 lots so that we can have the additional on the side and the back use of the garage. That would be a hardship just to maintain the ownership of that house in the condition it is, without us incurring a lot greater financial burden in fixing up that house. So that's something you need to keep in mind also. Just for us to maintain both houses wouldn't make a great financial burden to us.
I agree that it would be a financial burden to bring up that house, but it sounds more like a self-created hardship because you purchased the house.
We did purchase mainly for the additional side clearance, but we also did not realize the amount of work that would be involved in it, the expense that was involved. We're not realtors, we're not construction, and once we did get the information, it was more than we were anticipating. So you can say it's self-inflicted, however, that doesn't mean that there is not a financial burden to us.
That happens all the time. I totally understand that. But why aren't you just going to sell off the whole piece? I mean, I've heard it all, but given all that, if someone is willing to buy the garage and the house and do this refurbishment, which would obviously increase value for both you and that property, why wouldn't you just sell off that
We're not
whole
opposed
piece?
to doing that, but we want the option if we can. But we're not opposed to selling the garage if that's the only thing that will sell the house. Right now, according to there is parking there already. That's the entrance where it's, and I can't see very well, but 319, that's always been the entrance that the previous owner used to get in and out of that. So that was there. They also used to park their car just right on the edge, and it would still allow them minimal backyard, but it will also allow them a side yard. So there is a yard there, but it's minimal, but it would give them adequate space to have parking and also have some backyard. But again, it's just a financial burden for us to keep both lots just so that we can have access to the garage. Go from there.
Okay. Are there any other questions for the applicant? Thank you. I don't see anyone else from the general public that would like to comment on this. So I guess we need to bring it back to the board and have a discussion and/or motion.
It's a fascinating case, I have to say, because as we discuss accessory dwelling units and different types of density on lots and look at that kind of topic, this one is something we should look at in the future. But then we also have setting precedent, and I don't think that we don't need to go down the 2 garage thing on one lot. I mean, we know better than doing that. But if you contrast that against density and the possibility for expansion in terms of another dwelling unit, that's all different. But if we chop these lots, that isn't a potential. There
Yeah,
isn't
you
the
cut
potential
the
for an accessory
flexibility.
dwelling unit, right? Then we get to that cookie cutter lot chopping thing that you find in communities that did that prior to accessory dwelling unit planning and correct zoning planning. So that is where my issue is with this. I completely understand the applicants and what they're saying, and I totally understand having purchased a property and find out that the work is much greater because I sell foreclosures and I sell these properties every day in Salina. So I totally understand that. But I really believe that the property needs to be preserved in 2 pieces that are linear and similar. The 10 feet, I'm not sure about.
I would just share that one of the things that we determined when we looked at this was that if the 10 feet was sold off the south side of 319, that there was still sufficient setback there that's why you don't see any kind of setback variance identified there, because if 319 was narrowed from 50 feet to 40 feet, there is still an adequate setback. This green line reflects adding 10 feet to the south lot. So even with the new line, there's adequate setback because the house is kind of skewed to the north. But that is why we weren't particularly concerned about the narrowing from 50 feet to 40 feet, because it still gave an adequate side yard for the 319 parcel.
Okay, is anyone prepared to make a motion? If there's not one, I suppose the chairman can make a motion. Shall I offer a motion? My motion would be to approve the side yard variance and allow the transfer of 10 feet from the northern parcel to the southern parcel, but that the rest of the application be denied.
That would be option 2 or alternative 2 in your staff report.
Right.
I second that motion.
Are there any other comments on the motion to make the partial approval of the application? No further comments. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? There are none opposed. So, folks, we have made a decision that we are accepting the side yard transfer so that you have a wider side yard on your primary home, the 321 residence, which does improve your access to the large garage behind that home, but that we believe for the long-term viability of the neighborhood and the long-term marketability of the lots, that leaving 319 with its own garage and parking space is a better alternative, and that's the rationale, in my terminology, of denying the application for transferring the garage parcel to the 321 house. That being said, I think that's our decision for the day, and we thank you for your efforts. And our next item on the agenda is administrative items, where thankfully there are none. Are there any other unfinished or other business items need to be brought to our attention? Salina Downtown Inc. Annual meeting starts in a half hour. I'm planning to go.
We don't have any additional, we're not certain about whether you will have a May meeting or not. In terms of unfinished business, I do need to capture the chair because I have a number of sets of previous meeting minutes that need the chair's signature. So I will corral you for that. But we cannot tell you at this point for sure whether they will meet in May or not, but we'll notify as soon as we're sure either way of whether we have items or not.
Okay, and the scheduled day is what, is that 20th or 19th? Something like that. At any rate, third Thursday of
16th.
next month.
16th of May.
Okay.
We
All right.
We do
With
know
that being said, I guess it's time for adjournment. Last call. Thank you and good day.